I'm Jarita Malik, Assistant Professor, SMC College of Dairy Science, Anand. Today we'll be discussing about Module 35, Safety Aspects and Allergenicity of Food Additives. This is in paper Food Additive, paper number 13. Now, what are food additives? We already know, we have studied these chapters which includes different food additives like colorings, flavorings, preservatives which are intentionally added into foods to get certain desired effects. However, when we consume these foods, we are also consume these food additives. So, these food additives may be chemical, or well, we say it is synthetic, or even it may be natural. Even though natural, these food additives may sometimes be allergic to certain sensitive individuals. So, it is very important to assess the risk factor of consuming these foods containing food additives, and the regulating authorities are taking many steps and doing many risk assessment studies to see that the food additives are added within the prescribed safety limits that we name as acceptable daily intake level, and it is not consumed to an excessive amount that may cause certain allergic reactions or health hazards to specific risk groups. So, during the entire study of the paper, we have already understood what are food additives. Food additives as such are special chemicals that are added into our food supply on purpose, and they are meant to be in the food at the time of consumption. So, it is important to understand, since we are going to consume these food additives, so the safety aspects of these food additives becomes important. Additives includes preservatives for extending shelf life, flavoring and coloring for improving taste and appearance, as well as nutritional supplements such as vitamins, minerals. Also, we can say the contaminants from manufacturing, storing and packaging processes are also considered as indirect food additives. So, sometimes these indirect food additives are not quantified, but they can act as a source of additive and which is ingested by us and can cause sometimes health hazards. Food additives are generally intended to provide important benefits to the producer or consumer of foods, but sometimes these additives cause unwanted or unhealthful effects. So, often these undesirable effects of food additives are due to their excessive or accidental usage at an inappropriate stage of production, processing or storage, or from lack of purity or quality. So, as I said earlier, the contamination in the foods itself or from the food additives can also cause such accidental health hazards. Extensive research thus has been conducted on many additives to show that they are safe for consumption and are effective for their prescribed function. For other additives, there are widespread and long-term use by food processors that has demonstrated their safety and efficacy. Now, talking about food additive safety aspects, to prescribe food additives as safe for consumption and that they are effective, extensive researches has been conducted. Long-term usage also quantifies that these are effective and also they are safe for consumption. Now, sometimes we have a thinking that if something is natural, it will not have any health hazard, but it may not be true sometimes. So, whether a chemical is synthetic or natural may not have a bearing on its toxicity. So, we already know that some naturally occurring seafood toxins, mushroom toxins are relatively common causes of acute food-borne diseases, and they may be sometimes more problematic even compared to the synthetic food additives that are added in foods. Now, for the purpose of food additive intake assessment, it is important that the monitoring of the intake of chemicals and relating it to the acceptable daily intake values becomes important. So, if the acceptable limit is set and it is followed, there are very less chances that the safety aspects and allergenicity of the food additives can occur by consumption of these foods containing these additives. Also, to assess food additive intake, identifying consumer groups that may be at risk for food additive intake close to or higher than the ADI values. We know very well that it changes from individual to individual. the sensitivity towards certain food ingredients or additives. So, some hypersensitive individuals may find difficulty in metabolizing certain ingredients in foods. So, we have to identify this group and we have to set acceptable daily intake limits for this type of consumers and label it properly so that such additives when consumed does not cause health hazards to these susceptible individuals. Also, identifying consumer groups that may be at risk for food additive intake close to or higher than ADI values is important. So, we have to consider this fact in a proper manner. We have to provide for the regulatory bodies for reassessing the food additive regulations in case of high intake in all or some consumer groups. Now, let us understand what we mean by food allergenicity. So, a food may not be allergic to all people. Some people are more susceptible, some are less. So, it depends on sensitivity of an individual. So, many people have uncomfortable reactions to various foods that we generally call as allergy. If the chemical reactions or the cause of reactions are not known, then also medically we term the symptoms to be as allergic symptoms. So, it may be due to food additives or any other artificial chemicals such as pesticide residues rather than the food itself. The term, when we say allergy, it means various kinds of untoward reactions to foods without knowing the mechanism of such reactions. So, as I told earlier, when the mechanism of reactions are not known, it is usually in general termed as allergic reactions. So, it is a harmful physiological reaction and usually caused by an immunologic mechanism. When the mechanism is not an allergic one, but the reaction resembles allergic reaction, the term intolerance is sometimes used. As for example, when a person is not able to metabolize lactose, we consider such people as lactose intolerant people. So, the term intolerance is used over here rather than allergic reaction. When the mechanism is not known, it is hypersensitivity, which can mean both allergic reaction and intolerance. Hence, in food allergenicity, we see there are different terms used. Allergy is a common term, sometimes intolerance is used, and when these two terms are not used, hypersensitivity may be used as a term. So, this terminology may differ to a little extent from each other. When I say hypersensitivity, it means a small amount of a substance produces symptoms that can be objectively verified and repeated. So, repeatability and verification becomes important. If it can be verified and repeated, we can say the person is hypersensitive towards that additive. Now, let us understand the term allergy. When I say allergy, it is immunologic mechanism that are involved in the pathogenesis of symptoms. Another term is atopic allergy, and this allergy, the reaction is mediated by immunoglobulin E. So, when it is specifically the reaction is mediated by immunoglobulin E, it will be termed as atopic allergy, not allergy alone. When I say intolerance, it is a small amount of substance that produces a reaction similar to or closely resembling a true allergic reaction, but immunologic mechanisms are not involved. So, if immunologic mechanism is involved, it will be termed as allergic reactions, but if they are not involved, but certain reactions are being done, then it will be termed as intolerance reaction. So, as I said, lactose intolerance is a reaction similar to allergic reaction, but it is not caused because of immunological mechanism. Hence, it is termed as lactose intolerance. Now, we will see some intolerances and other non-allergic reactions. One is non-specific histamine liberation, which may be caused by consumption of cocoa or any cocoa-based products, citrus fruits, strawberries, etc. Another intolerance is intestinal diseases. A very good example is of gluten intolerance, which produces abdominal and skin symptoms. So, celiac diseased person cannot tolerate gluten, or we can say cannot digest gluten. So, that is causing intestinal disorders, and they have to eat foods that are free from gluten. Another symptom is primary or acquired enzyme deficiency, which may cause diarrhea and colic in cases like lactase deficiency. So, such people do not have enzyme beta D galactosidase, which is in common called as lactase enzyme. So, when they do not have this enzyme in their metabolic system, they cannot digest lactose. So, such persons are termed as lactose intolerant people, and they may find problem in digesting lactose containing food products. Another intolerant symptoms include microbes and other toxins, so which are produced by bacteria, viruses, yeasts, molds and fungi that may cause a diversity of gastrointestinal symptoms. So, this is because of certain contaminating microflora that is coming into the food product as a contaminant, definitely yes, or if the bacterial growth was very high in the raw material, after processing the toxins are remaining in the food product, they may also cause certain kind of toxic allergic reaction in the persons consuming this. There are certain psychological causes which may underlie various kinds of skin, gastrointestinal and other reactions, again a type of intolerant and other non-allergic reactions. So, as we had discussed earlier that food additives intake can cause certain allergic reactions, as we know, but they are usually occurring in individuals who are either sensitive or when we excessively consume these food additives. So, let us understand certain reactions caused due to excessive food additive intakes and those risk groups who are sensitive to these food additives. Now, despite the factors employed to ensure a minimum human sensitivity to the additives in food, particular sections of population are susceptible to additive associated with clinical disorders or even toxic responses, which are thought to have an allergic origin. So, certain food additives or food ingredients are tolerable by many people, but some risk groups or some individuals are sensitive to them. So, they can be categorized under these risk groups. So, though we can say which are these risk groups. So, we have to quantify the amount of food consumed by the groups. So, we usually say that young men have the greatest demand for food. A comparison of food consumption, however, if we go with weight to body basis, it indicates that children have the greatest intake of food, and thus when we quantify the risk group, we have to see that these children and the amount of food additives that they are consuming are also quantified. Also, children consume large quantities of certain items such as sweets and soft drinks that contain high concentrations of additives, and hence regulations should be adjusted to permit lower maximum additive levels in such foods. So, these fast foods, usually we say processed food industry, when they are making such fast foods will definitely contain food additives, and they are mostly consumed by most children who are more sensitive to such food additives. And as a result, regulation should be there so that it never crosses beyond acceptable daily intake of these risk groups. Also, some of the following considerations should be taken into account before estimating potential or maximum additive intakes or identifying population subgroups exposed to unacceptable risk. So when a food additive is known to be present in food but cannot be detected in analysis, the maximum additive concentration is assumed to be equal or to the lower limit of detection. So this method enables estimation of the potential average intake. Intake estimation can also be achieved by multiplying the highest additive concentration determined by analysis with the amount of food item or food group under consideration. Also, in order to increase the accuracy of estimating the maximum intake value, it is necessary to combine the additive concentration of analyzed meals with the true food consumption. For this, we need to go for duplicate meal studies. Now, let us understand some adverse reactions to food additives. So, which are those additives which may be risky to some people? some asthmatics can actually react to sulfites. A small percentage of asthmatics can react to sulfites. Sulfites are the substances we know which is used to prevent certain foods from browning. As for example, sugars are usually sulfited so that the sugars become very white crystalline in color, and definitely it becomes acceptable. Also, a very small number of individuals, maybe 1 or 2 in every 1000 population, are sensitive to FDNC yellow number 5, which is used as a food coloring which causes itching and hives in these sensitive people. Even monosodium glutamate, MSG, which is commonly used in Chinese foods, are known to cause Chinese food, or we can say Chinese syndrome, that is causing mild symptoms like body tingling or warmth and even chest pain. However, these symptoms are usually mild and often last less than an hour. Then another group of people are with a rare genetic disease known as phenylketonuria, and they cannot consume food which is containing an amino acid phenylalanine. So, if they are given food containing aspartame, which is an intense sweetener, or we can say non-calorific sweetener, they cannot metabolize phenylalanine, and aspartame is usually made from 2 amino acids. Phenylalanine is one of them. So, if aspartame is added in the food and this group of people suffering from phenylketonuria are consuming this food containing aspartame, it can cause serious side effects including tissue damages. Any individual that has adverse reactions to any food additives should read labels carefully and avoid these products whenever possible. Let us understand the regulation of food additive usage and the regulatory bodies involved. Understanding the safety of food additives. Now, food additives, it's said, when approved by United States Food and Drugs Administration, that is very commonly known as FDA, they are considered to be safe for human consumption. But still, US government has claimed that safety aspects of certain food additives are not fully known. Thus, with uncertainty about the safety of the consumption, the safety of food additives and preservatives should be carefully examined once more before eating them. Continuing with the understanding of safety of food additives, consuming modern synthetic preservatives other than food and color additives, they have been linked with allergic reactions, even cancer, asthma and even birth defects. For example, if a person develops sulfite allergies, it can potentially lead to fatal respiratory distresses. BHA and BHT is most frequently used food additive in processed foods, example in processed cereals. And these chemicals we know are usually added to prevent oxidation of fats and oils in food. Although United States Food and Drug Administration FDA have approved BHA and BHT along with 3000 food additives for consumption, they have shown to cause a number of health problems. Such studies claim that synthetic preservatives worsen attention deficit disorder and even attention deficit hyperactivity disorder symptoms in those affected. Other studies also show that certain persons may have more difficulty with digesting and metabolizing the compounds of BHA and BHT, which results in behavioral changes and other health problems. And because of this reason only, we know that many food products are banned to be added with BHA and BHT as antioxidants. Additionally, most fruit juices that are often marketed to the parents of young children, they also contain a lot of additives which includes preservatives, artificial sweeteners and even colorings. A study reports that preservatives such as sodium benzoates, which is an antifungal preservative, may cause increased hyperactivity in a 3-year-old and 8 to 9-year-old children. The increase of hyperactivity was about 50% great for those children who regularly drank fruit juices with additives than those who drank juice without additives. So, you have to understand that you have to be aware of these facts and take care for consuming these products. So, concern about possible effects of food additives on health which includes cancer, is one reason why many people are now interested in organic foods. We know what are organic foods. They are often promoted as an alternative to foods grown with conventional methods that use chemical pesticides and herbicides, hormones or antibiotics. So, these compounds cannot be used for foods labeled as organic. Organic foods, as defined by US Department of Agriculture, that is USDA, also exclude genetically modified foods or foods that have been irradiated. So, we are going towards a new sector of food products, that is organic food sector, and it is more in demand even though the cost may be high for production of organic foods, but people are now more concerned with the health hazards of the synthetic additives or the contaminants that may come into our food products. Hence, organic foods are a good alternative which may not cause certain health hazards which may be provided because of consumption of these food additives. Let us discuss about food safety regulations. Food and color additives are more strictly studied, regulated and monitored. They are even more monitored than any other time in the history. So, at present people are aware that food and color additives are to be taken care of so that they do not cause any health effect on sensitive people. The FDA sets safety standards determining whether a substance is safe for its intended use. Rigorous testing is done to determine the amount of safe levels of different food additives. So, better for us. Additionally, food manufacturers must prove to the FDA that their product is safe before it is put on the market. So, when it is FDA approved, you should feel happy that the food is safe for consumption. Also, majority of the direct food ingredients which are used on the basis of a determination that are GRAS, that is generally regarded as safe, or they are prior sanctioned food additives. Food safety regulations in India. Food safety in India is ensured by Government of India's Ministry of Health under the provisions of Food Safety Standards Act at present. So, FSSA standards, we commonly know it. State government, Food and Drug Administration, FDA, which carries out surveillance using food inspectors, does the enforcement of FSSA Act. There are food analysis laboratories both at the state and central level, verifies the authenticity of food products, and any food safety legislation or standard requires involvement of several aspects including research and development, information and documentation, education and training, quality assurance program, codex and international norms, advisory system, planning, enforcement and surveillance. Let us understand some global food safety regulations. Now, each country has their own set of regulations. As FSSA in India, US FDA guidelines and regulations gives American regulations for food additives, similarly for other countries. Now, sometimes a group of countries may also have a common regulation. For example, European Union directives which gives regulations for countries affiliated to it. So, this results into free exchange of food products across those European Union countries which are regulated by European Union directives. Under the World Trade Organization agreements, common regulations have been arrived at for signatory countries. This allows international trade without much problem. So, FAO and WHO has come up with codex rules which are accepted by these countries. Because once we are following certain act, it is in our country that we are following. Now, if we want to export our food product, we have to again follow the act prescribed in their country. So, if we want to export our food products to United States, we have to definitely follow United States regulations. So, under such circumstances, export of food products becomes difficult. As a result, such type of provisions are made. We can have WTO agreements and we can follow codex rules for exporting to many countries which are having common regulations under WTO agreements. Let us now understand approval process for food additives. Now, any new additive before getting approved must undergo rigorous toxicity studies which include acute and chronic studies involving biochemical evaluation, teratogenic studies, reproductive studies besides the LD50 tests. In the US, Delaney clause governs the approval of any food additive, under which the additive is banned if found to be carcinogenic under any condition or level, a very difficult zero risk condition. So, any food additive has to meet the standard to be allowed to be added into any food product. So, the risk analysis, which involves risk assessment, wherein the hazard is identified and characterized, exposure is assessed, and the risk is then characterized. After this, once the risk is assessed, it must be managed so hazardous conditions do not arise during processing or even during storage of these food products. Finally, the risk must then be communicated. So, labeling comes to play a very big role in this process of risk management. Now, let us understand general principles of food safety risk management. Risk management should follow a structured approach. So, as discussed earlier, in a structured manner, in a proper approachable manner, we should follow these strict provisions and see that risks does not come with the food that you consume. Then the protection of human health should be the primary consideration in risk management decisions. A very obvious thing, because even a small carcinogenic ingredient present in foods should be definitely banned so that it does not cause any health hazard even if it is consumed in a large quantity. Risk management decisions and practices should be very transparent, everybody should know it, and even the consumer should be aware of what is being added into the food product that they are consuming. Next is determination of risk assessment policy that should be included as a specific component of risk management. Next principle is risk management should ensure the scientific integrity of the risk assessment process by maintaining the functional separation on risk management and risk assessment. Risk management decisions should include clear, interactive communication with consumers and other interested parties in all aspects of the process. Risk management should be finally a continuing process that takes into account all newly generated data in the evaluation and review of risk management decisions. It should not be like that once the food additive is approved and it is considered safe, it should not be tested again. So, again and again the authenticity of the food product being considered safe should be tested and then put forth for use in food products. Now, the regulatory authorities involved in risk management includes the Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act of 1938 gives the US FDA authority to regulate foods, ingredients and their labeling. The 1958 Food Additives Amendment to the Food, Drugs and Cosmetic Act requires FDA approval for the use of new additives prior to its inclusion in food. And the food additives that have a history of safe usage are exempted from the regulation process, which are described in Food Additives Amendment. For example, food additives like salt and vitamins which are having GRAS status, that is, they are generally recognized as safe, may not be included in this Food Additive Amendment Act. Other important federal regulation of food and color additives is described in the 1960 Color Additive Amendment to the Food, Drugs and Cosmetics Act, the 1990 Nutrition, Labeling and Education Act and the 1996 Food Quality Protection Act. The current Good Manufacturing Practices, which we know as GMPs or CGMP, regulations can limit the quantity of food and color additives that are used in the production processes. In case of pesticides of food and animal feeds, the US Environmental Protection Agency and FDA have regulatory responsibilities for the approval and monitoring of pesticide use, because Food, Drugs and Cosmetic Act does not have any implication on the rate of addition of pesticides in foods and animal feeds. They come into the product naturally and should have stringent standards for their presence in the food products. So, as a result, US Environmental Protection Agency and FDA are doing their work. The usage and the labeling of food additives may be monitored through analytical testings, and label review of finished products or ingredients are to be thoroughly done. So, as far as monitoring are considered, there are federal regulations which are in place to determine if an additive is safe and if it is effective under its prescribed uses. Also, regulations may stipulate the permitted food uses or usage levels for hundreds of additives. Nevertheless, the usage and labeling of food additives may be monitored through analytical testing and label review of finished products or ingredients. Improved chemical analytical methodology has resulted in faster extraction and identification of additives from foods. And even many testing protocols can now detect chemical concentrations as low as ppb, that is parts per billion, with increasing discrimination. So, we have technology for monitoring, and we can do that in a better manner, and we can assure safety of the food products, which is actually the role of these regulatory authorities. So, we have seen the risk management processes, the approaches to study the safety aspects of many food additives. Even though FDA approves the food additives has GRAS status, still it may sometimes be not safe for certain individual. So, the individual or the risk group should always read the labels. After reading the label, you should have a clear-cut understanding about the amount of food additives or the type of food ingredients that may cause allergic reaction to you. The Labeling Act itself says what are to be labeled and what are not to be labeled. So, those safe ingredients which may not cause any type of reactions are usually not specifically labeled. As for example, if spices are added or certain condiments are added, and they are usually regarded as safe. So, they have GRAS status and they are collectively labeled. But when certain ingredients, certain coloring ingredients like yellow number 5, as per Food, Drugs and Cosmetics Act, they have to label specifically because they are allergic to certain individuals who are sensitive to it. So, labels are to be read carefully and to be understood, and the food products has to be consumed so that it does not pose any health hazard to you and does not cause allergic reactions. Labelings for food additives. The risk or benefits of food additives and ingredients must be clearly displayed for consumers. Very important. So, reading the labels, the consumer can be sure if the food is safe for the consumption or not, and if they are in the risk group, they can avoid consuming such foods containing those additives which they may be sensitive to. The Food, Drugs and Cosmetics, that is FDC Act, requires in virtually all cases a complete listing of all the ingredients of a food. The Nutrition Labeling and Education Act, which amended the FDC Act, requires most foods to bear nutrition labeling and requires food labels that bear nutrient content claims and even certain health messages to comply with specific requirements. Like spices, flavorings and colorings may be declared collectively without naming each one. The exception is FDC yellow number 5, as we discussed earlier, may cause certain allergic reactions to certain individuals who are sensitive to it. So, if FDC yellow number 5 is present, then it has to be definitely labeled. Otherwise, most spices and flavorings are collectively labeled and never specifically labeled. So, some incidental additives are exempted from ingredient labeling. As we said, the example is that of presence of peanuts. However, an increasing number of products are now identified that they may contain peanuts. While peanuts or peanut derived ingredients are not intentionally added to these products, but residues used in processing on a nearby equipment or in the previous production runs may have contaminated these products with peanut residues. Hence, those people who are allergic to peanut may know this fact that the product, even though intentionally not added, the product may contain peanuts. Since peanuts are one of the leading causes of allergic responses to foods, many companies have chosen to label some products that it may contain peanuts. Some processors have elected to process products with peanuts in a separate locations altogether from their product lines. So, they are certain that the peanut is not present in the food, and that's why they need not label it. Some foods may be identified or labeled to contain additives that can improve public or individual health. So, we know that many ready-to-eat breakfast cereal products are fortified with several vitamins and minerals, and they are labeled that it is rich in these vitamins, example vitamin A, D, E, etc. Some foods are also enriched with minerals like calcium, iron, etc. So, advertising claims that imply better health through consumption of a food product additive are permitted for specific additives, ingredients or inherent compounds. Example, folic acid is beneficial for preventing neural tube defects in newborn babies. Even allergenicity and hypersensitivity is to be labeled. Allergic people who are highly sensitive to soy, rapeseed, egg or sunflower seeds might react to lecithin, and sources of lecithin hence are required to be labeled in the food product. Usage labels of or about 10 mg per kg sulfites has to be labeled on a pre-packed foods within the European countries. So now we come to the conclusion of this module. So we can say we have studied so much on allergic reactions and so much food additives which may be not safe for consumption for certain individual. Still, it is seen that food additives are rarely shown to cause true allergic, that is immunologic reactions. Various pharmacological or other mechanisms are more common rather than immunologic responses. Reactions usually depends on individual tolerance. Now, according to FDA, consumption of food that is manufactured with food additives is almost inevitable. We already know that processed food industry is thriving on preservatives. Preservatives give shelf life and shelf life is needed for better marketing of the food products. So, whenever you are consuming such food products, definitely it contains certain preservatives. Now, recently food irradiation has become more common in order to preserve meat and dairy products, and labeling for irradiation is actually not required. Similarly, many of these modern synthetic preservatives are often labeled as ingredients for freshness, while their true meanings and dangers are concealed from consumers. Okay, so if proper labeling is not there, the consumers will not know what is being added, and it can actually cause true health hazard for these consuming people and who are especially sensitive to these products. The lack of testing of naturally occurring chemicals has resulted in a loss of perspective on the comparative hazards associated with food additives. So, concluding slide, we come to the end of this module and we have understood the different allergic reactions that may take place. We know what is hypersensitivity, we know what is allergic reactions, and we know what is intolerance. So, people may have intolerance to the foods, or they may have certain metabolic disorders because of which they are intolerant to certain food additives or they are sensitive to certain food additives. So, labeling becomes important there. However, sometimes labelings are done in such a manner that it may not give clear-cut instruction about the type of ingredient or the food additives they are actually added. So, it is very important to take care, and especially it is the work of the regulatory authority to see that the food is safe for consumption for any type of individual, and it is properly labeled, and the process is a continuous process. So, whenever there is a health risk assessed anywhere, it should be checked in a proper manner. We have analytical procedures nowadays which are more sensitive and very specific, and hence this data can be usually verified and monitored. So, let us look forward to more safe foods in our future markets.